We are good to go.
Excellent. Welcome to the February 6th, 2023 meeting of the CP6 Transportation Committee. My name is Brian Van Nieuwenhoven. I am the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at 7:05 p.m. As a reminder, New York State law requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count toward quorum. And I just double checked that for myself. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussion on these items, we will field questions from the public. Minutes for tonight have not been signed up by any of the committee members. Do I have a volunteer to take minutes tonight? Larry?
Larry raised his hand. Not
All
Zoom
right.
hand, but
Lawrence
physical
Schwartz will be taking minutes of tonight's meeting. You should have all received an email from the board office with a link to a doodle sign-up sheet for the minute takers, the committee meetings in 2023. For your convenience, the link to the sign-up sheet will be posted in the chat right now by Brendan at doodle.com. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
committee members, I will call your name and you'll unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Majed Abdul Samad.
Present.
Michael Devereaux.
Present.
B is excused. B. Disman is excused. Jason Fromwitz.
Present.
Matt Roberts is not able to join us tonight. Larry Shire.
Present. I volunteered to take the minutes. Did you get that?
Yep. Gabe Turzo.
Present.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
Ronnie White. I did not see Ronnie, so she is counted as absent. And James Wilson.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Give me 1 second. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Let us see if there are any objections. There's someone in the chat. Okay. Good. Seeing no raised hands or objections, the agenda is adopted for tonight's meeting. The minutes for the December 5th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the December 5th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. So we can stop the screen share now and discuss the ground rules of our meetings. Rule number 1, no one may speak until granted the floor. Rule number 2, committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. Number 3, the chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through the Zoom chat, through the Zoom video. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information like email addresses that were already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Rule number 4, when a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Rule number 5, committee members are required by state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting, from call to order to adjournment. If you must step away from your computer briefly, you're required to leave your camera on. We're moving into committee business. The order of the adopted agenda will be followed. Item number 1, request for parking regulations enabling handicap access at 25 Tudor City Place. I believe Brendan has information to share on the screen, and additionally, we should have a presenter from 25 Tudor City Place to discuss the requests that they've made. Go ahead.
Thank you to Manhattan Community Board 6 and the Transportation Committee for giving me this opportunity to represent 25 Tudor City Place, also known as Tudor Tower, and present our request to improve pedestrian access and safety in front of the entrance to our building. My name is Jerry Moore Murray, and I have been a member of the Board of Directors for 25 Tudor City Place for a little over a year now. And I have a confession to make before we get started. When the president of our board asked our board members who would be willing to present our request to the community board and the transportation committee, I did not hesitate to be the presenter because I was temporarily disabled. I have experienced firsthand the injustice and discrimination against disabled persons who cannot access our building, and for that matter, the entire east side of our block. On January 12 of 2022, I had total knee replacement surgery. When my nephew drove me home from the hospital and tried to drop me off in front of our building, there was not enough room between the parked cars for me to get out of his vehicle and enter our front door with my walker. He had to back up the entire length of the block so I could get out at the next intersection, which is not a safe move. I then had to walk about 60 feet to our front door. And I can honestly say it was the toughest walk of my life. So I am passionate about this request on behalf of all the residents of 25 Tudor City Place. My goal tonight is to convince you that we needed to create a sliver of space amid the parked cars on our street so that our less abled neighbors can have equal access to our homes in front of our building. Next slide. 25 Tudor City Place was completed in the summer of 1928. So we are a landmark building that has 439 units, 23 stories, and over 600 residents. Our building lies on a cliff east of 2nd Avenue. We overlook 1st Avenue with no through traffic to 1st Avenue. When driving to our building, there is one way in on 41st Street and one way out on 43rd Street. And there is no sidewalk break on our side of the street between 41st and 43rd. We have 3 commercial tenants, one of which is of particular importance as it relates to our request for designated parking access, building access, I should say, because this tenant, Metro Kids, serves our community's children from infants up to 6-year-olds. Metro Kids occupies the north side of the building's ground floor with direct sidewalk access for its staff, students, and parents. When parents are dropping off or picking up their children via car or taxi, it would make the most sense for them to be dropped off in front of our building. However, with parked cars the full length of the block in an uninterrupted line, it is too challenging for a parent to maneuver themselves and their child to try and squeeze in between the parked cars. The only times that people are not allowed to park in front of our building are on Tuesdays and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And this is to allow for street cleaning. And on the alternate side of the street, cleaning is on Mondays and Thursdays, 10 to 11:30 a.m. During these times, those parked in the no parking zone move their cars and line them up on the alternate side of the street to allow for the cleaning. After the cleaning is completed, they move their cars back to the original side of the street. It is very chaotic and adds to the anti-pedestrian atmosphere in our neighborhood. The majority of you are likely New York residents and familiar with New York's facade inspection safety program, otherwise known as Local Law 11. Because 25 Tudor City Place is over 6 stories, the law requires that our facade be inspected every 5 years, and we make any necessary repairs, and rightfully so. However, this leads to the installation of scaffolding, which you can see in this picture presents another obstruction to anyone trying to get on and off the sidewalk to reach our front entrance. The picture shows how the scaffolding butts up against the pole that supports the awning, which leads into our building. It is the same on the other side of the awning, and the distance between these two poles supporting the awning is about 8 feet. This slide provides a list of some situations where our community members have a difficult time gaining access to our front entrance. The most serious of these was when EMS pulled up to our building with their equipment to assist a resident in need. The parked cars prevented them from entering our building expeditiously. They had to walk to 41st Street and walk back to our building. I am sure you will agree that this is an example of when time really matters. I think these situations give you an idea of the challenges our situation presents to the less abled residents and community of Tudor City Place. In closing, I would like to share this quote from the author Stephen Krug. The one argument for accessibility that doesn't get made nearly often enough is how extraordinarily better it makes some people's lives. How many opportunities do we have to dramatically improve people's lives just by doing our jobs a little better? As a board member, I have a duty of care to the residents of 25 Tudor City Place. As a result, I hope I have successfully conveyed our need to improve access for people of all abilities, able and disabled, to the east side of Tudor City Place in front of 25 Tudor City Place. And that will help you in securing this accessibility so that, as Steve Cruz said, we will make the lives of some people extraordinarily better. At this time, I'd like to once again thank Manhattan Community Board 6 and the Transportation Committee for giving me your time this evening. And a special thank you to Brendan Berth, the Assistant Director for Manhattan Community Board 6, who provided me with the guidance to prepare for tonight and to secure a spot on your agenda. If you have any questions for me regarding this issue, my name and number and email address are on the bottom left. I can answer your questions now or after this meeting, whatever is most convenient for you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Moore Murray. So I have an initial question for you. Have you talked to the city's Department of Transportation about this request and gotten any feedback from them about it?
No, we went directly to Community Board 6 first.
Yeah, and I
Okay,
reached out to DOT, who said this should go on the Transportation Committee's agenda.
Okay, there is a question on the floor. Gabe, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. And I really appreciate the spirit of your presentation. I think I have certainly no issue with what you're asking for, but I'm curious on a kind of technical level, what are you asking for precisely, like to change the designation of the, like, is there a precise ask for the designation of that space?
What we would really like, Gabe, is for us to just be able to carve out a little space so that when somebody drives up to the front of our building, they can easily get access to the entrance. So for instance, when you think about the EMS situation, that vehicle pulled up in front of our building. The gentleman took the equipment out of the vehicle and then realized he could not get through because of the parked cars and had to walk down to 41st Street to get onto the sidewalk to then walk back to the front of our building. So the same thing applies, even if you're a parent who's getting out of the car or a taxi to drop your child off at Metro Kids, there's no way for them to have the taxi stop in front of our building and for them to try and get through the parked cars because everybody is on top of each other. And we don't have, as I said, there's no break on our side of the street between 41st Street and 43rd Street. So it's very difficult because the cars are lined up one after the other. And the only time that there's any type of an opening is when they're street cleaning. and then they come right back. They're just parking on the alternate side of the street, and it's incredible to watch it.
Oh,
to tell you the
yeah,
truth.
no, I understand exactly what you're saying,
Yeah.
and I'm certainly agree with your sentiment 100%. I guess what I'm just asking is there is a precise ask. Like I understand that you have a design that you would like to see implemented, or you would like to see accessibility. I'm just curious. Do you have a specific design ask
Well,
yet?
our awning, which I had showed a picture of, our awning is outside the front entrance of our building. It is 8 feet wide, that distance. Now, I know that we're not the ones that make the decision, as to what space we should be allotted. It would be ideal. It would be ideal if that 8 feet were open. It would be in conjunction with the awning. It would make sense, right? That there's the entrance to my building. The firemen know it. The EMS know it. Our people know it. It would just make the most sense for it to be the 8 feet at our entrance. But we didn't really, in coming here today, we didn't know, to be honest, if we were able to say specifically. We just wanted to convey our issue and to say we would be thankful for just a carve out of some space. But the most would be the 8 feet. That would be what would make the most sense to us.
So, and the logic has been presented. We still maintain the technical issue that if we're going to issue a recommendation to the city, we need to take the designation that they have, which is alternate side parking and otherwise, what parking designation that is there, and give a recommendation to what we think it should be. And we don't have the part where we know what it should be. We only have what it is. So we may have to look that up and spend a little extra time on that in the meantime.
So, Brian, could you tell me, is that your responsibility or is it ours? Could you tell me? I want to make sure that I leave knowing if I have to do something further that I do it.
It's an open question about process at the moment. I think I'm leaning toward making a recommendation that we revisit this after we have a complete exchange with the city's Department of Transportation about what the possibilities are here, because most of these requests do come back and forth between DOT before they come to us. So there are other committee members that have questions. Let's continue the debate on the issue. I'll recognize Larry next, then Majed, then Jason.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we're looking at an area which is functionally going to be somewhat similar to how a hotel zone would be operating, where you really want to restrict the amount of time that a vehicle stops in front and keep that space turning over as needed. Now, it may not incur the same kind of traffic that a hotel does, but on the other hand, the kind of parking regulation that we're looking at right now, I'm assuming is a alternate side of the street parking, so that means that a car could be there all week except for a few hours. Am I wrong, or is that the way it is?
You're right, Larry. The only time that a spot is available on our side of the street, as opposed to the alternate side, is during street cleaning, and that's an hour and a half, 2 days a week on either side. Either side. That's the only time that there's no parking.
Right, and if it was a no parking anytime, you could have somebody with a handicap tag stay there all the time and deny access to someone, let's say, who needs the hospital, like you were describing before. We've looked at places which have had no standing regulations. Have you thought about that as a possible ask?
I think that no standing would be better than what we have today. We are just looking to make it easier for our residents and those that serve our community, like the EMS and the fire department. So We just want a space.
Well, I'm just, Brian, I'm just thinking, maybe, no standing except for loading. Is that, what do you think, Brian?
I mean, on one hand, we have to present a resolution with a definite thing, not a maybe on it. But the other thing is that it depends on whether the committee feels good about taking a stab at that and passing that tonight and having it ready for full board on Wednesday, or knowing that we need some time to kind of look into this and that this is kind of a hurried thing and that our next full board meeting is 48 hours away, that if no one objects, we could take a look at this next month after having some communication with it with experts. But let's hear from some more committee members. Majed.
Thank you. I'll keep this brief. I actually live one building over, and I completely agree this is an issue. There are a number of different properties that assign just no standing and no parking just right around the entrance. So it would be just a 16-foot width. And this is not uncommon. Actually, in our district, in Sutton Place, this happens pretty frequently, and it's a common practice on non-major routes. That's non-avenues and routes that don't have emergency routes. So I think this could be in the resolution. Geraldine, I'm one building over. We have only commercial loading 7 to 7, so that's why we don't have the problem. But yeah, this is definitely a major concern. And even during the cleaning, vehicles don't really move. They just shift to the other side. So if there was any reason for an ambulance to reach, it would be even worse to come in those hours. So that is to say, I agree. I think there's course there for resolution to specify a no parking around the entrance and cite other examples in our district.
Thank you, Majed.
Jason, you're next.
Thanks. So I'm supportive of what you're asking for, which is no parking in front of the building entrance. But I guess my question is how and why we should consider this as a unique situation as opposed to like a recommendation for all. Like what is unique about your building entrance as opposed to all of the residential building entrances in New York City?
I think that,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jason. I think that one of the things is because we don't have the break in the sidewalk between 41st and 43rd, if someone comes in front of our building and then realizes they can't drop somebody off, the only alternative they really have is backing up, right? As opposed to moving forward and pulling into another street, like say pulling into 42nd Street. We're up above 42nd Street. So that's why we don't have any cut in our sidewalk. It's actually dangerous. You know, you see parents who are getting out with their children, and if the parent has more than one child, it becomes really cumbersome for them when they're trying to keep an eye on two kids, trying to get them out of the car, and they can't comfortably get them through these parked cars. You know, but so that's what makes us a little bit unique, is because we don't have that other cut.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Right. It's a long span without a curb cut on it. So even on like a side street, which normally has some sort of curb cuts or hydrants or whatever, you're saying this whole block is just unbroken parking.
Unbroken parking. Yes. Uninterrupted. Okay. Yes.
I believe our DOT rep is on the call with us tonight, Colleen Chattergoon. Colleen, can I call on you and get an opinion on you? What do you think is how we should proceed with this? What do you think is the ask, and how would DOT handle this?
Okay, so obviously I shared with you moving forward the procedure in terms of when we get such requests like these. I think it's fine if the board sends us a resolution saying that, you received the request for no standing for, this particular building, and we would, go out there and evaluate it, and we would get back to the board and the constituent, letting them know our findings. So I think in moving forward in this case, it would be fine sending us a resolution.
Okay. Gabe, you have your hand raised. I'll recognize you.
Thank you. So, okay, I'm getting a sense of the board that our sentiments are all on this, but we got to get our ducks in order. So I would like to raise a motion to table this discussion until next month when we can have a resolution ready.
Okay, do I see a second for that? Majed?
Yep, seconded.
All right, Brendan, we have to have a vote on a resolution to table, which will have us, give us some time to form a resolution with the proper language.
Yeah. So it's, since it's not a
If it's-
resolution and just a motion to table, we
It's
can
just
have
a
a
motion
simple,
to table in the interest of doing what I just said, but it's a motion to table.
yeah, so just a simple hand vote. So anyone in favor of the motion, raise your Zoom hand. I see 6 Zoom hands raised. You can put your hands down.
James is raising his hand in the video.
Okay, so it's unanimous. So the motion to table passes.
Okay, so Ms. Moore Murray, this means that the request is still alive. We are not going to advance it this month, but based on the conversation discussion we have, there is interest from the whole committee in proceeding with this and giving a recommendation to the city to essentially do what you want once we figure out technically what that needs to look like in terms of language. We will have to have a vote. It'll be on our agenda next month. So at the moment, there's nothing moving forward, but we're going to put it back on the agenda next month and we're going to look into this.
Excuse me, and do I participate next month? Or,
It will be a public meeting next month, so we do not
Okay.
need the presentation. It'll just be a follow-up to our discussion tonight.
Okay.
If you are not present or no one from 25 Tudor City Place is not present, keep in mind that we have video and we have your materials, so we need to be able to proceed on this.
thank you so much.
Want to come, it is a public meeting, and you may be able to answer questions if any additional concerns would come up. But most of the committee had questions already, so it would probably be redundant at that point. But
Okay.
you can come.
All right, thank you. I appreciate
thank you.
everybody's time tonight. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody. That means we're moving on to tonight's agenda item number 2, discussion of the red light camera program in New York City. Brendan, I believe we requested a presenter for this particular topic.
Yes, I see Alex from Senator Kruger's office is present.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. You have the floor, Alex.
Great. All right, thank you very much. Nice to be here. Nice to see everyone. So the bill in question is called S2812. If you go to the Senate website, you can find it under that name. And basically what it does is it drastically increases the number of sort of red light traffic control signal, basically red light cameras in New York City. So previously, currently we have about 150 red light cameras at different intersections throughout the city. And this bill would increase that number from 150 to 1,325. So as you can tell, almost tenfold increase in red light cameras around the city. And the reason for that is that where the cameras are currently installed, there's been a decline in traffic accidents caused by speeding and sort of running red lights. So the idea is that an expansion of this program would make street safety a lot more common, I guess, in the city itself. So it's currently in the, I believe, Transportation Committee. Yep, Transportation Committee. And there is no Assembly co-sponsor. So if anyone's curious about that, right now it's currently a Senate-only bill, as it was last year as well. So until we have an Assembly co-sponsor, that means that it's really only happening in the world of the state Senate. That, of course, could change anytime. So I'm happy to answer questions from anyone.
Yes, does anyone on the committee have questions for Alex? Gabe, you have the floor, then Larry.
Thank you. A real quick question. I appreciate raising the caps. I'm curious why we need caps at all. Like, just the whole concept of the cap on the number of lights seems extraneous to the process of safety to me.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I think it was more of a budgeting issue than anything else. More of like, we want to know how much money we need for the program as it stands, if I had to guess.
All right, Larry, you have the floor.
Couldn't that be handled simply as an appropriation and not limit the number of cameras? In other words, you appropriate the money that would be at hand each fiscal year to increase the number of cameras without being limited in any particular year. What do you think of that?
That's an interesting idea. I'm really more focused in the office. My focus is more on the actual policy when it comes to transportation. And I'm not as familiar with the budget process, so I can't really say for sure whether how that would work in terms of the money. So unfortunately, I can't really confirm that one way or the other, but it's an interesting idea for sure.
Well, my sense is that the restriction was put there to satisfy folks who want to run red lights and limit the number of opportunities they'd have to be caught. And so I would encourage you to take a look again at this and see whether from a policy point of view, putting a limitation in there isn't counterproductive. The second question I had.
Well, okay,
The
go ahead,
second
Larry.
question I had is, how many is there right now? Because I'm doing the minutes.
Right now, there's 150
Total for the city.
for the
Yes.
city. Yep.
It's crazy. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, while I have this, Alex, I have a spicy question for you. Is there any real opposition in the Senate or in the Assembly in regards to just having the program uncapped from, a perspective of, the actual driving aspect of it and the enforcement and, actual opposition to the idea of using automated enforcement instead of police officers, or the idea of having any sort of this increased enforcement is all because, as some people have said in the news, it's all a scam.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's nothing that I've heard of. There's not opposition that I know of in the Senate. I mean, the thing is, like I said, we have a good number of co-sponsors in the Senate. It's not, to be clear, it's not Senator Kruger's bill in the sense that she's not the one introducing it. That's Senator Gounardes in Brooklyn, coincidentally my state senator. So Senator Kruger is one of a few different co-sponsors in the state Senate. So it appears like there's support for it in the Senate itself from really, I think we have people from every borough. Oh, I guess there's no one from the Bronx, I don't think, but we have a lot of support from across the city in the Senate. But then again, like I said, there's no Assembly co-sponsor. So I don't know. I can't really speak to whether or not there's opposition, but I can tell you that there's a pretty broad base of support in the upper chamber.
Michael, you have your hand raised. You have the floor.
Thank you. The one thing I could speak about is red light cameras, that they do work, in my opinion. I drive, I represent a lot of members who drive, they get them, they have to pay them, it happens. Wood Boulevard in Queens, I think, is one of the best examples of them working. Prior to them having red light cameras, it was just a free-for-all. There was speeding, there was, accidents, there was people getting hit. The red light cameras come, if you go on that street, it's amazing that nobody goes over 30 miles an hour or 29 miles an hour. It's just so much safer of a street now because of the red light cameras. The one thing I want to say is that it's frustrating for me and for a lot of people that I work with, that a lot of these vehicles that have these covers on their license plates or have these contraptions that hide their license plates or have these fake, nothing's really, they're trying to crack down on them. But I would love if the traffic agents could enforce it more, or they could tow these vehicles or boot these vehicles, or there could be some kind of legislation that they crack down, because the average person who goes X amount of miles over the speed limit and gets a ticket, these people, in my experience, are the most reckless drivers because they don't care. They don't care because they know they're not going to get a speeding ticket or something like that. I would love to see the fines increased, and I would love to see even, if you have a cover on your license plate, like one of those clear covers, or you don't have a license plate, or you get booted until they see you take it off, or you pay the ticket or something like that to make it work for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll make sure to pass that along to my office.
Thank you.
Larry, you have another question?
Yeah, along those lines, is it possible to maybe amend this legislation to provide that if a vehicle does not, or maybe it's a separate legislation, if a vehicle does not clearly display its
So
license plate
Larry,
number?
to the extent that we're discussing that, we're starting to move off the agenda item. I didn't mind it being raised in the first place. We would want to vote on that. We'd want to put it on the agenda, and we don't need legislation to actually advance that particular concept. We can just put a reso out for it. Again, we're dealing with all the time sensitive stuff and all the stuff that's come to us as direct requests, but this is an interesting topic that we can hit up.
Okay,
I want to focus on
regarding this,
2012, yeah.
I think it's the sense of the committee, and maybe a resolution can follow that we're supportive of increasing the number of red light cameras in New York City without limit, and that this legislation goes part way but not far enough.
All right. Well, while you're mentioning that, Brendan, do you have a copy of the resolution that I drafted that I shared with you?
Yes, just give me a moment and I will share my screen showing that particular draft resolution.
So I wrote a basic draft resolution supporting the basically as a result in support of Senate 2812. It doesn't mention anything about having an uncapped program, but we can add that as an additional be it resolved, so that it's not all or nothing, that we're like not saying we don't want this bill and we don't want the status quo, we only want an uncapped program. We have the choice of voting on whatever we want, but there's a couple of lines of attack on this. And the one I started from was more of kind of what simply we tend to do, which is take a piece of legislation that's one of our legislatures has signed on to and simply resolve to support it. Gabe, you have your hand up. I'll recognize you.
Thank you. Just really quickly, there are 13,500 intersections in New York City with traffic lights. And I just thought that was useful for people to get a sense of the scale. Thank you.
Okay, that's interesting. So that would be 1 in every 10 intersections would blanket everything pretty well. So I'll give everybody a chance to read this. Do we have any motions regarding our discussion on this? Anyone choose to have a motion on this matter? Seeing if anyone's hand is raised.
I have a question.
Larry, go ahead.
When we speak about having red light cameras at an intersection, are they going in all directions, or just a north, south, or east, west?
I think that they're single direction, and I think that to the extent that people have asked for cameras, they've asked for cameras on avenues where they are one way, where the speeding problems or the red light problems that have been observed have been on the avenue itself in the one-way direction of traffic. To that extent, most of the intersections in our district are only one way intersecting with one way. So there's only 2 possibilities at any given intersection anyway.
But are you saying that it's only on one street, but not the cross street?
I think a camera is just the one direction. Gabe, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to vote on the resolution with an additional whereas regarding the caps.
Do you mean a whereas or a resolved?
I'm sorry, with an additional resolved.
Do you want, Brendan, do you want me to open up the reso and add text as we're figuring it out?
Yes, considering that presumably this resolution will be before our full board on Wednesday, seems wise to make sure the committee's on the same page about the language.
Okay, so therefore be it resolved, and then I'm going to jump into the end of this. Be it also resolved that does that text look about right? Be it also resolved that Manhattan Community Board 6 urges the legislature and the governor to consider a version of this legislation that entirely lifts the caps on the number of red light speed enforcement cameras in New York City. Gabe, is that what you were intending to have stated?
Yes. Yes, it is.
So that's the motion. Do I have a second on that motion? Larry, you're seconding the motion? You're muted. You're saying yes? Nod
For discussion.
for discussion. Okay, so wait, Larry, the motion was to vote on this, to adopt this. We already had the discussion.
The discussion is whether to vote yay or nay.
Okay, so is that a second to have a vote?
I'll let someone else second it.
Okay, Jason, you have your hand up.
I was going to second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion now to vote on this resolution as drafted that resolves for the legislature and the governor to ratify S 28-112 and to also consider a version of this legislation that entirely lifts the caps altogether. And that means it's ready for a vote. Brendan.
So when I say your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Majed Abdul Samad.
In favor.
Michael Devereaux.
In favor.
Jason Fromowitz.
In favor?
Larry Shire.
Opposed.
Gabe Terzo.
In favor.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
In favor.
And James Wilson.
In favor.
Okay. With 6 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstentions or abstentions for cause, the resolution passes.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Larry, you still have your hand up?
I do, because I had no opportunity to express myself before the vote.
I think you noted that you supported lifting the caps on the cameras.
Well, I wanted to say that at the minimum, this legislation would be acceptable, but the order of discussion in the resolves, I think, is backwards, because we should make the bigger ask first, and then at the minimum we would support the resolution. It's a change in the emphasis, and I think it's substantive, but we've already had the vote, and that's why I objected.
Well, we do get another crack at this at full board. We could always
It's not a major event. I think we've indicated our desire, but not our preference.
And I also think that passing this allows the board to take a position on this. And then the real meat of this is how we take that position and use it to provide a tailwind toward a real advocacy effort to actually get this kind of thing passed, because it does not sound like it's ready to be passed tomorrow. And so if we wanted to see this passed in this year of the legislature, people who are on the board or involved with advocacy can go back to their advocacy organizations and say, hey, by the way, CB6 passed this, and you can use their support for this in your effort to talk to the Assembly and the Senate about supporting it. So that's potentially more upside to that than getting the text sort of perfect in terms of preference to sequencing.
I'm not going to make a big deal of this now.
Okay. So moving on, we have agenda item number 3, discussion of New York City Council Intro 501/2022 regarding hazardous obstruction by vehicles and civilian complaints for hazardous obstruction violations. So this is, and Brendan, do we have anything to present for this?
Nope, but I do have the legislation itself, which I can share on screen if the committee would like.
Please do. So this intro would create the ability for citizens of New York to take pictures of some of these violations and use an app to send it into the city so that the violators can be ticketed. So this would be on top of NYPD and traffic enforcement, traffic, what does the TEA program stand for? Traffic agent, traffic enforcement agent, that's right. Anyway, so this would be in addition to that, this would be a DOT program that would allow DOT to collect fines on this, and this would provide an additional opportunity for these violations to be noticed and hopefully avoided. This text is here. I don't know if anybody has an opinion on this coming into this that they want to mention right now. This is a good time to open debate for that. So if anybody has anything they want to say, go right ahead. Larry, you're the first to raise your hand, so you have the floor.
Okay, I've read this legislation, and I think it's not really well written because it doesn't describe this methodology for something totally new that you've described better than this legislation does, in fewer words, as to how a civilian such as you or me or James Wilson, who had an incident which I hope he'll describe to us in the meeting, could get the report in and get it taken care, getting the problem taken care of. And there's a serious omission from this, and that is about the bus stops. And there isn't a single mention here of violations of bus stops and the vehicles that park in bus stops that prevent buses from coming to the curb. And then the last curiosity here is, why is this tied into schools? These problems occur everywhere. And I hope that you'll give James a chance to tell his story. I don't know if he has his hand raised or not, but those are my questions and concerns, and I could not support this in its present form.
Okay, Jason, you have the floor.
Thanks. Larry, to address your concern about the schools, I believe that was an earlier iteration of the bill that restricted it to be used to only apply within proximity of schools, and I believe that's been removed or resolved, as I understand from the latest version.
I looked at it this afternoon, and that's what I saw. I don't know. I used the link that Brendan gave us.
Okay, I don't know. Perhaps I have that wrong. But I just wanted to speak in support of the bill. I use the city's bike lanes regularly encounter cars parked illegally blocking these bike lanes, as well as a pedestrian, seeing cars parked on the sidewalk. crosswalks, etc. I do think largely motorists don't fear repercussions for these actions and therefore feel empowered to park largely wherever they want. And I think this would be a powerful tool to discourage drivers from parking in a way which creates hazards to the community. I will add, in terms of how the program would work, and since this bill doesn't address that, I think that's a benefit of the bill, that it would allow the Department of Transportation to figure out the best way to set this up, that they would be able to do feasibly. I'll also add that we do have a precedence for a similar program within the city. So there is the citizen idle complaint process, which exists, and I have participated in filing complaints for before. Basically, there is a series of things you need to document as an evidence of a commercial vehicle. I believe it has to be a truck that is idling for more than 6 minutes, anywhere without the restriction. And you take a video, and you fill out a form, as well as some pictures that need to be submitted, and they get reviewed by, I believe, the Department of Environmental DP. So there's a similar process that would be followable for the Department of Transportation here, which I suspect.
Jason, to what extent are those specific requirements, such as taking a video and so forth, set forth in the statute rather than part of the regulatory process? Because that's where my concern comes here. Because this is you know, kind of like doing whatever you feel like without enough guidance from the legislators. And I have a feeling that it could be struck down as unconstitutionally vague by anybody who would challenge this law. I think the law has to be more detailed than it is. I completely agree with your analysis of the problem and the need to do something like this. You know, don't mistake my objection to the legislation as it is. We have an advisory role here. We can state that we agree with the goals, but we desire that the legislation be improved to provide some guidance to the Department of Transportation as to setting up mechanisms.
I'll just add, and then yield the floor, that I feel like in this instance, I'd rather not make perfect. I forget the exact terminology.
Perfect, the enemy of the good.
Perfect, the enemy of the good. Thank you. Yes, in that I think this bill solves a real problem in the city, and I'm sure, I feel confident that the Department of Transportation would work out the details and how they can best implement it. And we could always readdress if it fails to work out we'd like.
I'll add to that with a lot of this stuff, like the problem isn't that we couldn't get consensus on this if we worked harder on it. The problem is that we don't have the capacity or the scope to really dig into this kind of stuff without essentially ignoring other problems, because we have a 9-point agenda tonight. So I pre-wrote a supportive resolution for this. Brendan, at some point you may dig that up now that the intro itself was on the screen for a while. Michael, I'll recognize you in 1 second, but and again, this is just because, not only because like we are trying to get through our own agenda, but because our next full board meeting is on Wednesday. I think I just want to let you know, though, as a committee, that if there's anything that you feel like could be better, that we can absolutely work on something for a month, come back to the next meeting, have a vote on the better version of it, and then send it to the next full board meeting if there's no time pressure on it. With something that goes to the legislature, there is time pressure because they pretty much decide everything by the time they pass the budget. So we want that kind of stuff to be up there a little bit early. After this month, there's less time pressure on that kind of stuff. With the council, their end of year is June. So I mean, they work through the full year. So we don't have the same concern with the council that something that we that if we approve something in June and it doesn't quite get into the city's budget process, that it will never happen or it'll have to wait till next June. Stuff like this in particular goes through the city's process pretty smoothly if they want to consider it later in the year. But in this particular case, this was just pre-written as a convenience for us to see if we want to pass it. If there's a substantive agreement for the whole committee that we do want to take a deeper look at this, we can motion to table it. We can, assign a writing session to Larry for it. On the other hand, if we have actual consensus that we want to adopt this resolution, then that's just the way that it will be. And then we'll have another chance to vote on it at full board if it does pass committee. But anyone has a plea to make to the full board in regards to shaping it up. All right, Michael, you go next.
Thank you, Brian. I have a lot of experience with the truck idling tickets. One of the biggest problems with that is that the agency that handles it, it takes so long for them to actually send you the ticket. It's like 6 to 8 months later. So you'll be getting a ticket 8 months later, and then you have to figure out where you were, what you were doing. And then it's kind of like, it's almost like you have to prove yourself innocent because you can't see the video right away. You have to plead not guilty, go to court. There's just a lot of like things that could be better about that. It's 3 minutes idling, but it could at a certain temperature, you can idle, or if you're using your gate, it's 1 minute in the school zone. I just think there's some flaws with that. The one thing I don't like about, well, there's a couple of things I don't like about this. One is there's so much aggression right now between car drivers and bike riders. I think this is going to cause fights. I really do think you're going to see people, bicyclists, taking pictures of people. People are going to see that, know that they're going to get a ticket, and you're going to see I think it's going to lead to a lot of physical conflict. That's just my opinion on it. I also feel that it's kind of a slap in the face to the NYPD, because you're saying now, I forget does it say it how much you're actually getting for these tickets, but they're getting a huge percentage on this 175, and you could get like 3 or 4 cars and make a lot more than what an NYPD officer is making in that day by doing this. So they're paying you a lot more than they're actually paying their own employees, which I think that is kind of like a slap to the face to the traffic agents. And I think it's mainly the traffic agents who write these tickets. I think if that, then why not incentivize for them to write the tickets? Why does it have to be civilians and take a work away from them? So that's just my opinion on this. Thank you.
So my knowledge on this is that there are some dynamics with the traffic enforcement agents, because they sit under the NYPD as an agency, that what the traffic agents do and don't do is kind of a function of what the unionized officers want them to do and not do, and what has been negotiated with those other stakeholders in mind. Because an NYPD officer themselves can also write these tickets, and the fights are already happening between citizens who want these lanes unblocked and the officers who don't want to write the tickets and think that this is not a thing that they want to have to do. I think that it kind of moves us in the lane of automated enforcement. There are some legitimate concerns if there are people who are able to do this efficiently as a labor source, and we're not getting an expensive vendor to do it, and if the city would be capturing more money, and if the officers and the labor is motivated to do the job, then that's fine. This is not what we're seeing at the moment. This would be efficient. This would be essentially adding on to a thing where we are already talking about 2 different wings of the same agency that claim that they cannot write more of these tickets, even though that the violations are certainly there. There's also a concern that that this is something where there's a lot of people with placards who are getting caught doing this, and I don't know if there's something with city employees discussing among one another, or whether they should give each other a break on that kind of thing. But I think that has been something that has been openly wondered, and adding in citizen enforcement and automated enforcement in the case of like the red light cameras kind of takes some discretion of human beings out of the equation, or at least adds in other biases to encourage enforcement. These are all good open questions. There's no perfect answer on that. I do want to say that this is a problem. This is something where drivers are not just ill-tempered in the sense that they fight with one another and with other people about enforcement and parking spaces and availability. It's also just that it's just happening in the first place, and that there are real violent consequences to some of these blocking things. They're quite dangerous. Some cases of blocking are things that, for example, they block sight lines around intersections and may cause cars to make very, very dangerous turns around illegally parked vehicles, and then hit pedestrians who are on the other side of it. And so one thing is that anything that might be able to help with that should take serious consideration here. But you know, there are certain other concerns. Hopefully, if those concerns are substantive, we can get more information about them. I did want to clarify, we're not time pressured on this particular piece of legislation unless we feel very strongly that we want to pass this and this as is, because then we could get it to full board by Wednesday. Larry, you're next.
Brian, there's one more thing I just wanted to add real quick. There's another question. Like, I know it's not our district, but Avenue B, I think between like Houston and 7th Street, it's lane of traffic and bike lane, right? If you're disabled or there's a store that has a delivery or there's a drop off, there's literally no place on the avenue where you can pull over and drop somebody off. So you would technically have to go around the corner to like the side street and drop someone off. So if you're dropping someone that's disabled off, you have to use the bike lane. You either have to like stop in the middle of the lane and let people off, and that's dangerous because there are bikes coming to the right side of it, or you have to go into the bike lane and drop someone off. Someone like that, is it fair that they would get a ticket because a civilian would take a picture of their car and they wouldn't know that it was a disabled person being dropped off or something like that? There's just places where there's no parking lane, there's no, you know, place to stop, there's no anything. I just don't see how that would work.
And the bigger question here too is that the vision on a lot of this stuff is to have the avenues, to have ample space for one traffic lane in each direction, to provision a bike lane where necessary, to have commercial parking around the corner, and to have sufficient available curb cuts that are not flooded, that give the access that is needed for people to access the street on the avenue. It's only 200 feet wide, so you're only 100 feet on one side or 100 feet on the other. People would plan this into their trips if they were dropping off people and whatnot. I do not think that driving around the block is this terrible thing to ask of people, especially if they're making deliveries or dropping off passengers with Access-a-Ride or something like that, to go to the place where the drop-off space makes the most sense. I think a lot of people would simply just integrate this in with their routines, and it could work. We get a lot of pushback on this simply because people don't want to give up those parking spaces on the ends of the avenues or on the ends of the side streets, in addition to whatever restrictions there are on the avenues. So I think to some extent, we don't want to unnecessarily irritate people, but there is kind of a vision here with this. And I think that when you put all these things together, it's reasonable, it's effective. And, you know, some of the pushback does seem to be, you know, just in favor of keeping that car parking, and we just don't have the space for it in the city for everybody. We never had the space to begin with to have an equitable distribution of parking for everybody, and we certainly don't have the space to continue to allow all of this parking on the curb everywhere, you know, right up to the curb cut, and then allow illegal parking on top of that, and just kind of look the other way and, you know, not really consider the consequences. And I mean, again, like, I'm glad it's not just about like being absolutist about the danger stuff, but also having a vision to say, hey, we do have a solution for this. And there is a consensus to some extent, or there at least a vision on this as well, that that curb parking can be allowed, but it is the last use of the space that will allow after all other needs have been addressed. So that said, I will recognize Larry next, then Jason, then Majed.
Okay, great job, Brian, on this resolution. The only thing that I would make a change to relates to the omission of bus stops. And in the second whereas and the therefore, we can mention them very briefly. In the listing in the whereas of the different situations where someone is illegally parking, we could add after bus lane, insert the word bus stop.
Yeah,
And
let me, I'm opening this myself right now.
Yeah,
This is one of the reasons why I pre-wrote these, is because I set this up for us to be able to have this kind of thing.
yeah, this is terrific.
I will take this as an amendment because I'm
Yeah,
proposing.
yeah, okay, but you could put it
But,
in red, you could put it in red for right now or something like that, for just to focus on it. And then in the resolved, no, not another resolved. In the resolve that is currently there, I would write and urges the New York City Council to add bus stops and pass it into law as soon as possible. And pass it into law. Yeah, and that's simple and to the point.
Just hold on one second, because I want to do this as a function of Zoom. If anybody objects to us adding bus stops to the text of this resolution, don't even worry about raised hands, just say it out loud, unmuted right now. Hearing no objections, we're going to go with it. Okay. Jason's next. You have the floor.
Thank you. I wanted to address some of Michael's concerns. First of all, in regards to the blocking of the bike lane on tight streets where like Avenue B that you mentioned, I believe the legal method for handling that would be to block the traffic lane and not to pull over and block the bike lane, and to leave the bike lane clear, but to stop in the traffic lane, in which case there would be no photo/violation. So I think that's how that could be addressed. Also, in terms of the violence that you're concerned about, I do think that's a valid concern. I'll add, though, that there's an existing program, sort of informal program with the TLC, where they will accept complaints of TLC vehicles and photograph evidence of TLC vehicles that are parked illegally or performing recklessly, etc., and impose fines against their drivers where that happens. I know a lot of civilians take photos and videos, myself included. I will admit that I have actually been a part of violence on my part, directed towards me on taking some of those photos. So I agree that it is a valid concern. That said, I think like people take that risk on in how they conduct themselves, how they do it, when they do it, exactly how visible they make themselves. I think that's a decision people who would want to participate in the program would have to make for themselves about like if they want to be exposed to that risk. And I think it's a decision that's appropriate for them to make themselves. And then lastly, in terms of the payment component, I appreciate your concern on that you're basically like overpaying over the officers. I'll look at it from a different light, that like it creates a exciting opportunity to create like an additional revenue source for like our delivery bicyclists. I think it's exciting that like perhaps these people work very hard in very awful conditions, largely biking, and I think it's exciting to like kind of to give these folks who are very impacted by this bill the opportunity to like supplement their income with such a program. And that's all I have.
Yeah. And I'll just add into this that when it comes to the idling stuff and also to the TLC stuff, because there's a user submission program for that, that a lot of the people who are doing the majority of enforcement on that are people who are just kind of like, they're not actually in transit, they're doing it. That's like, they're taking this up as like kind of a hobby because, well, I don't know what their motivations are. I'm kind of busy otherwise, but they're not even really making money on it. They believe in the enforcement and they want to change things. And they've been at the hand of some of these irresponsible people operating cars in the city. So they're motivated to do it and they're getting results on it. And we could certainly talk about that sort of thing in a future discussion on this. I'm not prepared with it tonight, but I just wanted to mention that it's not necessarily like people on the bikes who are going to be taking the pictures and making submissions. It's probably going to be people just walking around neighborhoods, covering their neighborhood and saying, I see this, I see that, I see that, and probably working on the idling and the TLC violations and this all at the same time. Something to think about. And I have not heard fistfights breaking out over this in particular. I think in terms of conflicts with drivers and whatnot, I think bicyclists are much more likely to get in that kind of situation when their life has actually been threatened by an encounter, which unfortunately is more of a case when somebody was actually almost driving into somebody. All right, Majed, I'll get to you next.
All right. Also, I'll keep this brief. While I am fully in support of where this is going, I think in areas where we don't have an alternative for people for drop off or for freight, we are just creating a different kind of problem. While I understand the legal recommendation is that you block traffic, that just creates a very different problem. The noise, vehicles coming head on, and a bigger blind spot. So I wonder if we should consider the difference between blocking a bike path and a bike lane. A painted green bike path like First Avenue, Second Avenue, which people park on all the time. And it's absurd. This is why I would be in favor of this. But not specifying bike lanes where you have sidewalk parking, then the bike lane, then one lane of traffic, where it's sometimes almost inevitable for vehicles to have to stop for drop off or for loading. So again, I feel like is a distinction, just so we're not creating a impossible situation for folks that can't get around without getting a ticket.
So in DOT, they basically call them a class 1 and a class 3 bike lane. So that's their thing. Since Colleen's here, Colleen, do you have anything to add to this about distinguishing between the two in terms of language? I think class 1 is sharrows, class 2 is a painted lane, class 3 is the separated lane. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Our language, if we were to modify it, would have to reflect that. So keep that in mind.
Got it.
Gabe, you're next.
I would like to make a motion to vote on the resolution as written currently.
Do I hear a second for that? Larry, you have your hand raised? You're muted still, Larry.
I would like to invite James Wilson to tell the committee what his situation was, because the kinds of enforcement actions we're speaking about here might have resulted in him not being in the hospital right now. James, are you there?
Good evening. I am not in the hospital at the present time.
Oh, thank God.
Now, on November 21st, I was waiting at the bus stop at 70th Street and Lexington Avenue. There was heavy traffic at 5 p.m. The 102 bus stopped, but not in the bus stop. It was away from us distance. I could not see this, but a car passed around the bus stop and then backed into our bus stop. That car backed into me and broke my right kneecap. In any case, I've been laid up since November 21st. And I don't think that the bus driver used proper judgment in stopping his bus where he did. And certainly the driver of the car that hit me did not use proper judgment. So that's exactly what happened. And I've been laid up since that time.
James, really sorry to hear that. I hope you're feeling better. I hope you recover.
Thank you.
As a point of information, right now we had a motion proposed, and there were other people with their hand raised. So Jason, did you have a response regarding the motion?
I'd like to second the motion, please.
Okay, so the motion is to consider the intro, the resolution supporting the intro as it is written. Due to that, I think we're ready for a vote. Brendan,
Okay, committee members, when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Majed Abdul Samad,
Opposed.
Mike Devereaux,
I'm opposed how it's written now.
Jason Fromowitz,
Support.
Larry Shire,
In favor?
Gabe Terzo,
In favor.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven,
in favor.
and James Wilson.
In favor.
With 5 in favor, 2 opposed, nobody abstaining, and nobody abstaining for cause, the resolution passes.
So for those who voted to oppose as written, there's a chance to propose amendments at the full board meeting on Wednesday. However, if you want, email me anytime. Talk to me about how we can update the board's position on this to align better with what you're thinking, and we'll see what's possible. You know, everything that we do is a kind of a fluid thing. If this program can be improved in by adding some extra context or extra recommendations, we can certainly vote on that or consider it at a future meeting of the committee. So that said, as we have had a vote on this, we've conducted our business. The next item on the agenda is item number 4, discussion of illegal parking extended curbs on 2nd Avenue at East 19th Street and East 20th Street, based on concerns raised by 2 members of the board, one who is not even on the transportation committee and wrote into the office about this. So the situation is on 2nd and 20th and 2nd and 19th, on the east side of the street, there are pedestrian refuge areas in the part of the street that normally would have been the parking lane, and they sit between the roadway with the vehicles and the bicycle lane. So you can see them there. You could see that historically there have been flexible delineators there. In the meantime, those have been wiped off the face of the planet. I think that the suggestion that has come forward to us, it started with a more vague, can we get some sort of protection there? And we found out after doing some inquiries that DOT had done some protection, those delineators, and they just get run over by cars. For example, the red SUV that's actually parked in the pedestrian refuge, that should probably get one of those tickets we were just talking about. Because the flexible delineators are not working, we have the option to discuss as a committee, adding recommending to DOT that they add a different kind of reinforcement here, so that it would be less physically able for cars to cross the boundary of those pedestrian refuges. So I'll leave it at that. Colleen, do you have any clarifications or additions to that, or does that sound where we sounded like we were left off in the email thread about it?
So this is the standard design that we have in these areas here. And this is pretty much an enforcement issue. That car does not belong there. And I don't see what else that we would be able to put there. You know, maybe, I don't know if a granite block is possible in that area.
Well, look on the other side of the cyclist that's there. And I think so. Oh, actually, Brendan, twist the map a little bit back northbound. So you see how you have those more reinforced flexiposts there?
Yes, those.
And those are protecting a new bicycle rack installation. Because you're essentially with the tough curb and the enhanced posts, you're sending a stronger statement to vehicles that this is going to hurt if you try to cross it.
If the board wants that type, then, we can look into that. Can you send us the letter? It doesn't have to be a resolution.
We'll send you some written communications on this. But I was just mentioning this as an example because the real issue is the Flexipost where the bicyclist is, and then there's a tough curb there. So the idea is, if DOT believes that those work in general and that they can simply be replaced when they're run over, then that's fine. I just want to elaborate for the committee's information that when this complaint came to us, that we were basically told DOT doesn't have any protections here. Can we get something? And it turned out that it was a case of these Flexiposts had not been there for so long. They'd been run over by drivers and pulled out of the ground. They hadn't been there for so long that people in the neighborhood didn't even know that DOT had a solution for this.
I know. We will continue to replace those flex posts if we know they're missing. So we rely on the community. So if anyone complains about them, just let me know and I will, have my colleagues come out there and repair them.
So that's DOT's position on it. I get it. I've been on this committee long enough to know that that's DOT's position on it and why that's their position. It is, for the committee to consider that and also discuss the idea of what it looks like potentially if we wanted to make an open-ended suggestion that some stronger type of reinforcement were kept on those boundaries so that vehicles didn't feel so free to run over the posts. Keep in mind that in some of these situations, but not all of them, there are FDNY concerns. And those are important concerns that we would absolutely listen to. We do not want to block fire vehicles and response vehicles from getting into sensitive places. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that every Flexipost has that sort of concern going. So I see some hand raised. The order I see in the chat is Jason, Michael, Gabe, and Larry. So I'm gonna go with Jason first.
Thanks. I'll disclose that I'm the one who brought this to Brian's attention to discuss for tonight. I think a granite block would be great. Either granite block. I've also seen planters in similar setups from the DOT. I think that'd probably be slightly preferable over the granite block. But
yeah, Jason, we would love to have the planters, but we would need a maintenance partner, and I don't think there's a bid in this area.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. As far as I think that the granite block solution would work well, or the bike racks here. I guess my concern with the bike racks, while I agree they seem to be effective at preventing parking, they're, as you can see in the picture, they're sort of underutilized. So I don't know. I think probably the granite block would be more of a permanent structure. That's all I had.
Yeah, to my knowledge, those bike racks had been installed pretty much that week. So they were very, very new at there's not a lot of bike racks in the city that don't have a bicycle permanently chained to it. Anyway, Michael, you have the floor next.
Hey, thank you, Brian. I think one of the issues in this area is that there's a precinct right there, and just seeing all the police vehicles. I know the 13th precinct's been a good partner to the community board in the past. I think we should reach out to them and, I don't know, see if they need extra parking, to see if they need, things, because I think it's going to cause no matter what we put there, unless it's the bars, they're just going to park somewhere else probably that they maybe shouldn't be parking, because there's obviously not enough space for the officers or for the vehicles or for whatever it may be. I think to protect the bike lanes, like the bike racks look like no one could actually park there, but I do think it's going to overflow and they're just going to park somewhere else. I could be wrong, but I do think it is the precinct's cars that are parking there. So I think that's an issue we might want to reach out to the 13th precinct about.
I'll just agree that it is either the precinct's official NYPD vehicles or largely NYPD placard personal vehicles that are parking illegally in those spaces, which likely explains the lack of enforcement.
I think the bigger problem
the
here.
NYPD and let them know.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate. I think the bigger problem here, the reason why the Flexiposts are disappearing is because they're getting run over by cars that are going through these intersections that are actually trying to use the traffic lanes and using the Flexiposts as part of their slip lanes. So part of the problem is definitely cars that are trying to park, probably running over the posts, but I think it's somewhat of the more violent at speed, collisions with moving vehicles that do more damage to the posts, and is probably more of a concern because those vehicles in making those traffic transgressions pose far more of a risk than the cars that are just parking in the refuges. They're both problems though. Gabe, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. So I would just like to speak more generally. I believe FlexPosts are more or less a waste of money. Like, they clearly don't change driver behavior. Drivers follow more the laws of physics than the laws of the road. And I don't mean that about professional drivers, Michael, but I mean in a broader statistical sense. Drivers will drive where they feel safe, as recklessly as they feel safe given the street design. So FlexPosts, whatever they cost to put in, is just kind of wasted money. They don't last long. They don't change behavior. So I'm kind of personally agnostic as to the solution, but I think we should begin to start disregarding FlexPosts, or maybe limiting the role that they play more broadly.
Okay, thank you. Larry, you're next.
I think part of the problem here is the lack of a visual cue as to the location of the crosswalk. For some reason, the crosswalk is interrupted, and as a pedestrian, I find that confusing. And I imagine as a driver who's making the turn, and you don't see the crosswalk, you're also not seeing the FlexPost. So they may be driven over simply because they are just hard to pick up. If Colleen could comment on why the crosswalk is discontinuous, I'd appreciate that. In other areas, we have concrete pedestrian refuge. I assume this is supposed to simulate that, but it just doesn't create any kind of a feeling of safety.
So Larry, eventually that space will become concrete. We use the truffle to, again, monitor to see how effectively it's working. So eventually those spaces that are in truffle will be concrete.
Can I make the ask that before it becomes concrete, that you continue the crosswalk through the truffle area, because those big zebra stripes are a lot more visible than the little FlexPosts.
I can't give you a definite answer tonight, but that's something our geometric design would have to look at. And if the community board feels so strongly about that, I always recommend something in writing.
So this is basically where we're at. As a service request, if there's FlexPosts missing and our goal is to get DOT to replace them, then we could talk to DOT and DOT will replace them, and they're relying upon us for the service requests. I would recommend to DOT informally that there's a more intense inspection of these, because they do go away pretty quickly, but that's neither here nor there. They could be replaced as is. If we wanted something more protective, we would produce a resolution from the board that would ask for that if the committee advances to the board. So that is something that the committee will have to think about. Jason, you have your hand raised. I give you the floor.
I just wanted to address in terms of the block. I think it's a good idea to extend the crosswalk markings into the refuge area, but I don't think that's entirely the problem. But I think that could help with it as well. If you look down the block on 19th, it's a much larger area, and so that whole area ends up, even if you do extend the crosswalk painting, that would still leave basically, so like that where that vehicle's parked is, it's not really blocking the crosswalk today, but it is still blocking that refuge area. And where that's problematic as a pedestrian crosses there regularly is it completely blocks the line of sight of that bike lane, and you have no visibility into oncoming bicycles as you're approaching the bike lane when there's cars parked in the space that they shouldn't be.
Jason, can you just repeat what you did? What is the reason for that? I'm sorry.
The reason why it's hazardous?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're walking across the street from basically where the street view vehicles parked, crossing that way towards eastbound, as you're approaching that red car there, you really can't see any approaching, particularly depending on the type of vehicle that's parked there. It's very hard to see approaching bikes that are approaching the intersection. As a pedestrian, I have observed that many bikes don't stop when the light is red and may continue on, and it's very helpful as a pedestrian to see if there's oncoming bike traffic in that bike lane as you're approaching it for as a safety matter.
Could you imagine if everyone followed the rules, how easy things would be?
Okay, so I think we have an idea of where this can go. And I think my question is, do we have anything where we want to present a resolution tonight, or do we want to come back to this? Well, if nobody says anything, we will come back to this next month. How about that?
I'll volunteer to draft a resolution.
What would be the resolved in that resolution? Oh, what, not for tonight, but for next month?
Yeah, for next month. The granite block placed in the refuge area. So request that from the DOT.
Okay, if anybody else thinks that they have a suggestion that would work, that doesn't have to be as heavy-handed as a granite block, I'm fine with a granite block personally, but that could be up to any of you. But if you have any other different suggestions along those lines, email me, we'll talk about it. I'll bring it up to Jason.
Would you mention the continuation of the crosswalk striping through the refuge area?
Yep, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
We'll start with those two things and we'll evolve it from there. And that's why we have committee meetings. So that's great. Excellent work, everybody. Larry, that was your comment? Perfect. I think we're going to move on. Agenda item number 5, continued discussion of New York City's transit departmentation, 3rd Avenue upgrades, revisiting CB6 commission study by Sam Schwartz consulting on 3rd Avenue. I do not have anything new to report on this tonight, including I do not have feedback from DOT that DOT is coming to us with anything at this point. As you recall, where we left off on this is that CB6 produced a resolution in 2020 that advocated for a certain type of street design. It then also passed a resolution authorizing the expense to bring on Sam Schwartz Consulting to do a the study and the presentation that essentially figured out a way to traffic engineer that design in a way that DOT liked. That design was presented to the board. That design was shared with DOT. DOT has since installed a different design uptown that looks more like the design we were just looking at on 2nd Avenue. And that's where we left off, where we have the design that we suggested. The design that we suggested and that Sam Schwartz made a variation of, it's the board's policy right now that Kyle can go and advocate for that particular design. And just keep in mind that that design did not include bus lanes or bike lanes. I have heard some feedback that some people who are advocating for different visions of 3rd Avenue really preferred that those things be included. If we could do something that reconciles all of this, we can do it. But that is where we left off in the past, and I hadn't heard any other feedback from anyone else. And we don't have anything with time pressure on this. I will turn it over to the committee. Does anybody have any comments on this at this time? Seeing no additional comments, what I'm going to do is try to come up with a kind of another working group structure. This is one of the reasons why we're trying to wrap up the 57th Street working group stuff, is to clear some space on people's calendars to take a fresh look at this problem. It is not usually productive to brainstorm this kind of stuff in the middle of a committee meeting. This is the reason why we do things the way that we do them. So no problem for now. It's on everybody's radar. continue to think about it. I don't think we're going to have a discussion on this tonight unless anyone else has anything to say for now. And of course, we know that 3rd Avenue is unpleasant at the moment. Seeing no further comment on that, we're going to move on to agenda item number 6, continued discussion regarding safety issues at East 57th Street and 1st Avenue. My impression from the working group that's been working on that is that there's some discussions about wrapping that up. There is no resolution to present tonight. Does anybody who's been participating on that want to add in any commentary on it?
I'm happy to jump in just real quick. I think we should have a resolution, 2 proposals, either as packages, 1 resolution, or 2 resolutions available for the March meeting.
Okay. All right, so we'll keep it on the agenda for March. Does anyone have any other comments about that particular matter? Any updates, any additional news, any further research about anything we were talking about in past months? Seeing no additional comments, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is the report from NYC DOT. Colleen, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. So we're putting together a milling and paving schedule for this season and for this year. And I always reach out to the community board and ask them if they have any locations that they would like us to survey to determine if it meets our criteria or eligible for repaving. If you can let me know, or if you can provide that list to Brandon, and we will do a survey and I will get back to the community board. And I do understand, that the board really would like, something to be done about, this 3rd Avenue. And we're working with Community Board 8. Eventually we will come to Community Board 6 to give, an update on the latest and where we are. And we would have to reconnect with Sam Schwartz's office to find out if there's been any changes. I know, there has been internal communications about 3rd Avenue, and we're looking at the corridor to make some safety improvements. And we understand, like, each community board, that corridor is different, it varies. And we just want to make sure that what we present to the community board, it's exactly what, the CB is, requesting. So I will definitely keep you posted on that and let you know what the next steps are. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Colleen. Does anyone have any questions for Colleen or anything to report? Larry, you have the floor.
It's a thank you to DOT for restoring the City Bike Station to Avenue C, just north of 16th Street now, because of the construction for the ESCR next to Murphy's Brothers Playground, taking away the sidewalk space that previously had been occupied. So thank you, Colleen, for getting this back quickly.
You're welcome. And I just want to say to the committee, I mean, if you notice anything that's out of place in the roadway, like the missing flexi post, feel free to reach out to Brendan, because Brendan is, he emails me, all the time to let me know, and we get those, fixed as soon as possible.
Yeah, we'll continue to look out for that.
Yeah.
Just know that I know at this point that there's going to be a couple of intersections where the flexi posts have gone down enough times that there are community concerns that that an escalation of tactics once is desired. We know what we have to do in order to recommend that. So just bear with us as we talk out that stuff. Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Colleen. Colleen, DOT's vehicles would be categorized under DCAS, right? That'd be under the umbrella. Is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Right,
But I you know what, Michael, let me find out, because every agency have their own vehicles. I would have to find out who is the, overall hierarchical power that we report to in terms of, yeah.
I would appreciate that, Colleen. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll find out and I'll let Brandon know tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have questions for Colleen?
I have a very quick question.
Yes.
Sorry, Colin, you mentioned this earlier. You said the three types of classifications for bike lanes are tracks 1 to 3. Did I get correctly that? For
Yeah.
protected versus conventional, which one is protected?
So protected, you have the floating parking adjacent to it.
Right,
Yeah,
but
with
what's
the
the
buffer.
classification? That's 1 or 3?
I think that's 1.
That's 1. Got it. So conventional would be 2.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Okay, seeing no further questions for Colleen, we will move into the next item on the agenda, which is the chair's report. Brendan, go right ahead with this. Just wanted to give you guys a quick tour of Grand Central Madison, which now has seemed to open an $11 billion train station in our district. Enjoy these photos.
Technically
Larry was
just
also
outside
there.
our district.
Larry took the inaugural train that went from Manhattan to Jamaica. It is kind of in our district. There are entrances kind of to it in our district. It doesn't even go under our district, does it? Like even when it crosses over, that's in CB8, right? Yeah, just show them the big escalator. Show them the train platform. It's lovely. Anyway, just wanted to make note of that. That was there. The other thing that is an update is that the board passed a resolution back in 2020 requesting parking designations along First Avenue between 35th and 36th Street adjacent to St. Martin Park to be Parks Department parking in order to prevent or head off Parks Department vehicles from needing to park directly inside of St. Martin Park. We have followed up with DOT this month to try to ask what is going on in regards to those designations. This did pass as a resolution of the full board. My first instinct on this was to try to get us a new reso from this committee, but we don't need it because our opinion's already out there. And so we're going to look at that. Maybe one of the reasons why this kind of escaped mention or notice for a little bit was because I think it came under the banner of parks or land use or something like that. But in any case, we're following up on that. And that's it for me as a chair. Let's move into the next agenda item, old or new business. Does anyone have any old or new business?
My new business is it was nice meeting a lot of you at the event we had. That's old and
Yeah,
new.
that was good. Does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Good. We're adjourning the meeting at 8:47 p.m. Have a